October 1932, Johannesburg. Hundreds of people have been queuing since before dawn outside the High Court. Some slept on the pavement overnight just to get a seat inside. They have all come to watch a single woman stand trial for murder. The courtroom is packed beyond capacity. Every wooden bench is taken. People are standing along the walls 3 deep. The public gallery falls completely silent as the dock door opens. No one moves. No one speaks. No one looks away. She enters the dock without hesitation. She sits. She opens her notebook and uncaps her fountain pen with practiced ease. And then she looks out at the packed gallery with the calm expression of a woman who fully expects to walk free. From the very first witness to the very last, she writes, every testimony, every question, every answer recorded in her neat, steady hand. Her pen never stops. Observers would later say it was the most unsettling thing about her, that absolute, unreadable composure. Daisy Louisa Hancorn Smith was born on the 1st of June 1886 in Seven Fountains, a small rural settlement near Grahamstown in the Eastern Cape colony of what was then British South Africa. She was one of 11 children. In 1903, at the age of 17, Daisy enrolled at the Berea Nursing Home in Durban to train as a nurse. She was, by all accounts, an outstanding student, precise, capable, and completely in command of everything she was taught. Nursing training in 1903 meant learning to handle morphine, strychnine, arsenic, and dozens of other controlled substances. Daisy learned their chemical properties, their correct dosages, and their precise physiological effects. She learned exactly how much of each was too much. On a holiday in Rhodesia, Daisy fell in love with a young civil servant named Bert Fuller. They planned to marry in October 1907. On the very morning of their planned wedding, Fuller contracted black water fever. He died before noon that same day. Bert Fuller left Daisy £100 in his will. It was the first inheritance of many. She stood at his freshly made grave and placed a single white flower against the marker. Then she went home, and she moved on. In March 1909, 18 months after Fuller's death, Daisy married William Alfred Cowell, a 36-year-old plumber from Johannesburg. She was 22 years old. They would go on to have 5 children together. 4 of those children would die. On the morning of the 11th of January 1923, William Cowell became violently ill shortly after taking Epsom salts that his wife had personally prepared for him. The first doctor who attended him saw nothing alarming and prescribed a simple bromide mixture. By the time the second doctor arrived, Cowell was foaming at the mouth. His face had turned blue. He screamed in absolute agony if anyone touched him. The second doctor immediately suspected strychnine poisoning and refused to sign the death certificate. Strychnine poisoning produces one of the most agonizing deaths known to medicine. The muscles go into violent and uncontrollable spasm. The back arches. The jaw locks rigid. Full consciousness is retained throughout the entire process. The victim feels everything. An autopsy was subsequently performed. The cause of death was recorded as chronic nephritis and cerebral hemorrhage. No strychnine was detected, or rather, no one looked closely enough to find it. Daisy, the sole beneficiary of his will, inherited £1,795. £1,795. In 1923, that represented more than most working men in Johannesburg could earn in an entire decade. Daisy counted the notes carefully and methodically, deposited them into her account, and then she waited. On the 11th of January 1926, exactly 3 years to the very day after her first husband's death, Daisy married again. His name was Robert Sproat. He was another plumber. He He was 10 years her senior. He had absolutely no idea. In October 1927, Robert Sproat became violently ill. Excruciating abdominal pain, severe and uncontrollable muscle spasms. The symptoms were identical in every detail to those experienced by William Cowell 4 years earlier. But Robert recovered. His reprieve lasted exactly 1 month. On the 6th of November 1927, Robert suffered a second and final attack after drinking beer prepared in the company of his wife. He died within the hour. His attending doctor certified the cause as arteriosclerosis and cerebral hemorrhage. No autopsy was performed. 2 husbands, 2 identical sets of symptoms, 2 death certificates signed without any adequate investigation whatsoever. Daisy stood at Robert's graveside in composed mourning. She subsequently inherited over £4,000, plus the full amount of his pension fund. 2 inheritances. 2 plumbers, 2 men who died with identical symptoms after their wife had prepared them a drink. The letter confirming the second insurance payout arrived on a Tuesday morning. Daisy read it carefully, set it down, and went about her day. By 1931, Daisy's only surviving son, Rhodes, was 19 years old. The relationship between mother and son had deteriorated sharply and consistently. Rhodes expected a substantial inheritance when he turned 21. He had quit multiple jobs. There were frequent and bitter arguments. In late February 1932, Daisy packed her son's work lunch, as she did every single morning. She prepared his coffee carefully and poured it into a thermos flask. She was meticulous, as always, about the exact amount of everything she added. On the 2nd of March 1932, Rhodes Cowell fell violently ill at his work site after drinking coffee from the thermos flask his mother had packed for him that morning. A colleague named James Webster also drank from the same flask. Webster survived. Rhodes did not. Rhodes died at home at midday on the 5th of March 1932. He was 20 years old. The post-mortem examination recorded the cause of death as cerebral malaria. He was buried the following morning. On the 1st of April, Daisy received his life insurance payout. £100. The life insurance payment on her only surviving child. Rhodes was buried under the brutal midday sun at New Brixton Cemetery. Daisy stood at the graveside, dressed entirely in black, completely still, her expression giving absolutely nothing away. Robert Sproat's younger brother, William, had never accepted his brother's death as natural. When Rhodes died under equally suspicious circumstances, he went directly to the police. Scotland Yard responded by sending one of their most experienced and senior homicide investigators. On the 15th of April 1932, investigators obtained a court order permitting them to exhume 3 bodies: William Cowell, Robert Sproat, and Rhodes Cecil Cowell. The exhumations began at dusk under portable lantern light. What the forensic pathologists found would change everything. Rhodes' body was in an unusually good state of preservation for a corpse that had been buried for 6 weeks, a known characteristic of arsenic which kills the bacteria responsible for decomposition. Strychnine traces were found in the vertebrae of both husbands. Their bones had turned distinctly pink. Police scoured the poison registers of every pharmacy across Johannesburg and the surrounding area. They found nothing for weeks, until a local newspaper published a photograph of the accused. A pharmacist in Turfontein recognized an old customer and came forward immediately. Abraham Spilkin had sold a small quantity of arsenic to a woman on the 25th of February 1932. She had provided a false name, Mrs. D.L. Sproat, her name from her second marriage. She had told him the arsenic was required to destroy a sick cat. She had signed the register. On the 19th of April 1932, 2 plainclothes detectives walked up the front path to Daisy de Melker's home and knocked on the door. She was formally arrested and charged with 3 separate counts of murder. Her response, witnesses later recalled, was completely calm. The trial of Daisy de Melker opened on the 17th of October 1932 at the Johannesburg High Court. It ran for 30 consecutive days. The press described it, from the very first morning, as the most sensational criminal trial in South African history. Throughout the entire 30-day trial, Daisy de Melker sat in the dock with an expression of complete and studied composure, attentive, unreadable. Her notebook open on the railing in front of her, her pen moving, her face giving absolutely nothing away. The Crown's star witness was Professor James Mitchell Watt, toxicologist and professor of pharmacology at the University of the Witwatersrand. For 2 full days on the stand, he presented forensic evidence that was, in his own carefully chosen words, entirely inescapable. Then came the moment no one in the courtroom had anticipated. The pharmacist, Abraham Spilkin, was called without warning as a surprise witness. Those present later reported that for the first time in 30 days, Daisy de Melker's pen stopped moving completely. The defense advocate Harry Morris was widely regarded as one of the most formidable cross-examiners in the entire history of South African law. He attacked every witness without mercy. He exploited every inconsistency. On the charges involving the 2 husbands, he very nearly succeeded. Justice Leo Greenberg concluded that the Crown had failed to prove conclusively that either husband had died of strychnine poisoning. Those charges could not stand. But on the 3rd count, the deliberate murder of her own son, he reached what he described as the inescapable conclusion. When asked if she had anything to say before sentence was passed, Daisy de Melker looked directly at the judge and stated clearly, "I am not guilty of poisoning my son." She was condemned to death by hanging. Her face went grey, but she did not flinch. On the 30th of December 1932, at Pretoria Central Prison, the sentence was carried out in the early morning hours. The street outside the prison was completely empty. No crowd had gathered. The city of Johannesburg had already moved on to the next story. Her 3rd husband, Sydney, maintained her complete innocence until the very last moment. He brought white violets to the prison on the morning of her execution and placed them on her coffin. He never remarried. He never stopped believing that she was innocent. Because her legal cost had been so enormous, Daisy de Melker died entirely insolvent. Every asset she had ever owned was liquidated to pay her lawyers. She was buried in a pauper's grave, unmarked, anonymous, and indistinguishable from 1,000 others. She entered South African popular myth almost immediately after her death. If a door blew shut on its own, people said it was Daisy. If a child's hair was unkempt, they said she looked like Daisy de Melker. The name became shorthand for something no one could quite name. As a physician, I have administered morphine at the bedside of dying patients. I have made decisions about dosage that I will carry for the rest of my career. There is a line between controlling suffering and ending a life. It is not always a clear line. Every doctor knows this. Somewhere in Braamfontein, Johannesburg, in the building that was once the Transvaal Children's Hospital, where Daisy first trained as a nurse and first learned about poisons, one light still burns on the upper floor late at night. People say she never really left. A thermos flask, a sick cat, a false name written in a poison register, 163 suspicious deaths, 3 exhumed bodies, 1 criminal conviction, 1 execution by hanging, and 1 question still completely unanswered after 90 years. Why did she kill her own son?